The Fisker Karma works like a diesel locomotive does. Horrible relationships with the places that can actually service them. Welcome to the fellowship. And I'm like, easy dude, I'm not trying to join a cult. I'm just thinking about buying a Fisker. By the way, pterosaur, yes. So that's why we didn't buy a Fisker Karma or a Tesla. Maybe someday in the future, but for right now, Maserati. What's up, people? So today I wanted to talk about the Fisker Karma as well as the Tesla Model S, and specifically why we, meaning my wife and I, didn't buy one. Because we actually really wanted one. So I want to tell you about that experience the whole way through and what led us to the train of thought and actually the utilitarian reason why she ended up choosing a 2008 Maserati Gran Turismo instead. Obviously a very different kind of car. Now, to start this conversation off, my wife is actually something of a car enthusiast, albeit a bit different than me. I like really fast cars and race cars and projects and flying pterosaurs on the ceiling. Oh, by the way, I do crazy things on this channel and you should totally subscribe. Really cool builds and all. But anyway, that's what I love. I love the edge, I love the history, so I'm okay with things a little more masochistic and a little less utilitarian. But my wife and I both appreciate style and design and the intellectual, like soulful aspect of a car that tickles our fancy, you know what I mean? So for me, I might love a V12 engine with a stick shift because it gives me mind feelings of Le Mans on straight at the race Le Mans or something like that. You know, things that are evocative and exciting. But my wife didn't grow up with the racing aspect, so there are other things that are interesting to her conceptually. So for instance, the Fisker Karma, very beautiful car, very exciting, interesting, evocative, pretty colors. Tesla, very handsome car. And they are both different than just being a straight internal combustion car. Now, the Fisker Karma, and a lot of people don't realize this, they call it a hybrid, but it is different than the normal kind of hybrid. So the Fisker Karma has an internal combustion engine in the front. I believe it's a turbo 4-cylinder General Motors base, and it has electric motors that drive the wheels and battery packs. So it's in fact hybrid because it has both internal combustion and electric, but it's different because the internal combustion engine in no way is mechanically linked to the wheels to drive the car. The internal combustion engine of a Fisker Karma is only a gas-powered generator to generate electricity, which charges the batteries, and what drives the car and moves it forward are in fact the electric motor. That's it. So that's interesting because that, in a sense, the Fisker Karma works like a diesel locomotive does. So diesel locomotive has a diesel engine, internal combustion, which drives a generator to generate electricity, and it's the electric tractive motors that move those locomotives forward. So it's an interesting concept and unique in the car world. And then of course, Tesla being fully electric. It's got battery packs, it's got motors, and it goes. And when I first thought of the Fisker Karma to mention to my wife, and she's like, ooh, that's interesting. We were looking at things like BMW Z3s and Z4s, you know, sporty little cute two-door convertibles that were an attractive price point in a used car market right now for her. We were looking at things a little more normal, you know, kind of sedans, internal combustion, maybe it's BMW, et cetera, and things that may be a little more chic, but could be utilitarian, like a Porsche Panamera used one. Four-door could be a good car. And the Maserati Gran Turismo was kind of the, you know, saucy, exotic two-door car with a Ferrari drive V8. And since my wife wasn't into like super racy cars, didn't necessarily think she'd go that way. But the first car we looked at was in fact the Fisker Karma. And I gotta be honest, when we drove it, I thought it was amazing. It was interesting, it was evocative. It was one of the most exotic cars I had ever been in, and it felt very exotic. Because one, it has huge wheels, interesting proportions, and that it just was captivating. It was interesting to look at as an art form itself. So my wife and I both enjoyed that, of course. The interior was beautifully appointed, the leather. Some of them have cloth that's recyclable cloth, and they have things like fossils in it, and things to reflect of being more environmentally conscious. And of course, a very interesting design that felt exotic and fashionable, but futuristic and spaceship-like. So it's neat, it's interesting. And of course, the Fisker Karma, when it's in what's called stealth mode, which is fully electric when it's quiet, and I believe speeds under 25 miles an hour, maybe 30 miles an hour, it puts out that sound It actually generates like a weird spaceship noise to project to the community. Not like so loud it'll annoy the neighbors, but enough to weird them out because it's like wow, 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 wow. Sounds like a creepy spaceship, which is cool. And my wife was really into that, and honestly, so was I. So it was exciting, and obviously being electric, the way it moves the wheels forward, it's very smooth, it moves out well, it's quick enough to feel good and sporty and do everything you need to. But the thing that's probably the most interesting about the Fisker Karma, other than it's a very beautiful and interesting car, is because it has an internal combustion engine that you can start up or shut down and just run it full electric, like in stealth mode or normal mode or sport or whatever. That car has a shorter range on full electric. I think it might only be like 35 or 40 miles, something rather small. But truthfully, the Fisker Karma does and did what a Tesla can't. And while a Tesla has a tremendously better range and performance and utility, let's be honest, the one thing a Tesla can't easily do is just drive across the country and not have to pre-plan a trip. Because there's only so many supercharging stations and such, and yes, I know that Teslas have really amazing interfaces that tell you where those are and help you plan the trip, but it also takes a while to charge. So you have to plan long trips. But in a Fisker Karma, you can go to any gas station, fill it up with gas, and you're right back on the road. It's generating electricity and moving you forward. So that's an interesting concept. I say it's an interesting concept because in practice, it's not actually that efficient. When you figure out the miles per gallon, it's like in the 20s, which is nothing really to write home about. I've driven Corvettes that get much better gas mileage, fuel mileage than a Fisker Karma in fact does. But concepts are important for social media movements and times. And also the nature of the Fisker Karma, even though it's not highly efficient, when it's running gasoline and generating electricity to drive it, it works well in utility. Because in our hometown, my wife could plug it in at home, drive it basically almost everywhere she needs to go, just fully electric. I would say 80–90% of her trips can be just electric and never turn on the gas engine, except a couple of times just to keep it maintained and happy. But it allows you the flexibility to go as far as you want, anytime you want. So there is a lot of utility value to the Fisker Karma over a Tesla. If you like the concept and you really, really appreciate the art and you want to be that unique individualist and have that style, but still be conscious of a direction that's more environmentally sound. So you can still be an automotive enthusiast and love the art and the performance and all, but it works slightly better in the real world as a concept. Now I know all you want to argue, so I'm going to go on to the Tesla and say what's positive. And then we're going to come back as to why we didn't buy a Fisker Karma or a Tesla, and instead bought a Maserati, the internal combustion engine, loud, annoying scourge of the electric and hybrid community. So, the Tesla, okay, Model S. Now, I had driven the Roadsters back in the day, which were effectively electrified and rebodied Lotus Elises. That's what they were. And they were a neat car. I thought they were really cool, but I was kind of a snob curmudgeon when I saw them because I'm like, how is this helping the environment? The only guys I know that have these bought them to park alongside their frickin' Lamborghini Aventadors as a novelty, which is true. So it was a novelty, but you know, in the span of human existence, shall we say, with neat new or technology and stuff that push boundaries forward to the future in hopefully a good way, oftentimes those technologies and things are only available to the wealthy to start with, but that's not a reason to knock them. So Tesla obviously has built a lot of cars since then, and the Tesla Model S and all of its variants is a neat car and really worth considering because even if she has to commute a long distance, let's say an hour every day, the range of a Tesla Model S is fully sufficient to do that. So truthfully, a Tesla Model S, even a nice used one is what we were looking at, would be sufficient for, God, I don't know, 95% or more of our driving without ever actually having to go to a charging station beyond just our house. But those big long cross-country drives, like if Gina's Garage is going racing in Wisconsin or Florida or something, wouldn't work out as well for the Tesla because she would have to plan the trip, it would take longer, and then if you're at a racetrack and there's no charging stations, you got to get around, it kind of becomes a pain in the butt. So that was kind of a downside, and you need to figure something out for that. Or if we want to go on a cross-country trip to visit family, we would have to plan ahead. But that's kind of the fun and the adventure of having a Tesla. And obviously their computer system is amazing. Now, the positive thing about the Tesla, before we go into the negatives of that and how we ended up with the Maserati. The Tesla, my wife said something to the effect of she doesn't want to like it as much as she did. And that's interesting. And that goes into a huge cultural aspect of it too, because the Tesla Model S was amazing at being a car, but it wasn't amazing at letting you feel like an individual. And that was the problem. And she loved it, and frankly, I loved it too. When we first test drove it, I'm like, this is the car, this thing's great. You know, you get the self-driving aspect, you've got incredible touchscreen, navigation, supercharging, everything is convenient. The performance was awesome in traffic. It was planned, you know, when it's doing the regenerative brake things, you barely even have to use the normal brakes, the brake pedal that is. And there's no transmission tunnel hump or place for the exhaust. So if you're in the back seat, you can put your feet wherever you want. And there's so many great things about it. Since you don't have the center console, I know this sounds silly, but for all you ladies watching, you get in your car and you want somewhere to put your purse. And in normal cars, there's nowhere to put your purse, except in the passenger seat. But in a Tesla, you can put it right there. Or for guys, if you got a briefcase or a book bag, whatever, same thing. So in utility, it works awesome. Had great trunk space, and it was a relatively good-looking car. Really can't knock it. And I also like some other aspects about Tesla, the connection, like they'll come pick it up and fix it and whatnot. The downside, of course, is you're not getting that thing fixed everywhere, but there's enough support and all that it'll probably be pretty good. So let's say why we didn't buy the Tesla to start with. It was boring. It was really great at being a car, but in no way made you feel special or good about yourself or fun. Now, I realize a zillion of you have a heck of a lot of fun in your Tesla and you love it and you sit back and watch the scenery go by and you do that. But being an individual and the feeling of individuality and expression is important. And we couldn't figure out a way to do that, and it bummed my wife because it was an amazing car, but it wasn't exciting. So I said to her, okay, we like the Tesla, maybe someday we'll get one, and maybe that if you have another car to have fun. But let's not do that right now while you don't have kids and stuff. Let's have some fun. So we ruled the Tesla out. Just for us, it wasn't fun. A Tesla was no different than a cell phone. The difference is you get in and drive it around. And a cell phone's not fun. I don't get excited about these. They just drive me nuts. It's just a utility. So that's why we didn't get it. The Fisker Karma. She really wanted one. Loved the concept. It was unique. It was really cool. It was something to talk. It tripped all the boxes as well as going a good direction. Like if Tesla was good enough to adopt some Fisker-like qualities of the design and whatnot, it'd be a lot more interesting. You'd feel more like an individual and interesting concepts. And obviously the Fisker being the range extended, I think they call it, with the internal combustion engine generating was helpful, although not the direction Tesla's going. Here was the big problem. I knew that both of those cars, with their technology and such, were at a point where I can only service so much of it. Unlike more conventional cars, as you guys can probably imagine from this garage, that I could fix or things of my own. And since it's my wife's car, I wanted to make sure that I can look after it well for her, considering these are all used. And Fisker is not in business in the way that it was back in 2012, the 1 year they built those cars. Now, Karma is the company that exists now and has the Revero, I hope I said that right, which I think started in 2016 and is still being produced, I believe. And there are, in fact, Karma dealers. Now, the Fisker Karma from 2012, which we were looking at, can be bought well with low miles, and if you find one, well, it can be had. And there's also other places that service them. Now, with a car that's only produced 1 year, it's going to have a few quality control issues and teething problems, which could relate to the metallurgy in a certain drive shaft from a certain VIN number range, or a cooling fan that could overheat. And in general, I think the populace needs to understand that a car company that comes out of nowhere, doesn't matter what it is, and only produce cars for a couple of years, or are producing their very first car, it's not reasonable to expect the car will have no problems. That comes from time going by, and in no way is that a detriment to the design or the company, really. And if I'm not mistaken, the thing that actually really killed or drove the nails in the coffin of Fisker originally were battery recalls. So the batteries in that company ended up being faulty or an issue or something of that, but because of all those recalls, it really just crushed the company. But here's why we didn't buy one, point blank. Horrible relationships with the places that can actually service them. The truth about a Fisker Karma is it's got a normal car battery in it to run subsystems and start it up and get things going and lights and whatever. And the solar roof on the top of the car, I believe, is supposed to charge the normal car battery to look after things like that. And the problem is, if it's parked inside for a long period of time, and it's not used daily and that thing's not being charged and it goes dead and you replace it at home, you can do that. It's not that hard. But if I'm not mistaken, the car becomes a paperweight and inoperable until a dealership plugs into it and tells the computer, hey, it's cool, or something of that nature. So I heard it becomes a paperweight in that circumstance. So with that alone, I realized that a Fisker Karma, I would have to plan on either paying to have it trucked every so often to be serviced out of state, whether it's the Karma dealer in Indy or the private shop that does all the Fiskers somewhere in Pennsylvania. And that could be okay if you really like the car and you really vibe with it. But you really want to buy the right one and do your due diligence to see if it has records and recalls and things like that done and where in the VIN range it is. And that's what we were doing. And before we even bought it, I called the private service place for Fisker Karmas and other EVs in Pennsylvania, as well as the Karma dealership in Indianapolis. Now, both of them spoke to me, although the place in Pennsylvania, like, you could tell he just didn't want to talk to anybody. And I was very kind and direct with where I was at and saying, hey, longtime car guy, collector, builder, thinking about buying a Fisker Karma, really like it, just doing a little due diligence, starting a relationship, since obviously we have to have service done by a place that can interface with these cars properly. And he's like, yeah. And I was being nice. I said, I'm wondering, are there particular things I should especially look out for when buying it? And I wasn't asking for like the Encyclopedia Britannica or, you know, something on it, but I'm just figuring if the guy would be like, hey man, just look out for this, this, and this, and otherwise it'd be cool. And didn't say anything. The guy was like a real curmudgeon. And that turned me off a little bit, but not so badly. And I said, well, obviously I'd like to serve with you guys, but I'm looking at a few cars. Is it possible that if I give you the VIN numbers, you can tell me if it has had any service or recalls, etc.? And he kind of just did not want to be bothered at all. But he agreed to let me send the VIN numbers in of the cars we were looking at. And we did. Never heard a word back, never picked up the phone after that. So I'm like, okay, this is not a good sign about getting the cars serviced in wherever in Pennsylvania this place is. So I talked to the Karma dealer in Indianapolis, and they can in fact look after Fisker Karmas. Although they were trying to sell me a used Karma from a few years ago because the price has come down enough and they've had a lot of bugs worked out, could be worthwhile. But that was outside of the price range of what my wife and I could spend. So I said, well, I really appreciate it, and that's good to know, and maybe in the future, but we're gonna be looking at Fisker Karmas. And that guy was nice and did the same thing. He actually offered to let me send the VIN numbers and cars to see what it was. And I said, hey, I'm going to be in Indianapolis for some other things relating to racing and sponsors here. I'd love to come by the dealership, check out the cars, meet you, and just see what you think. So I sent him the VIN numbers and emailed it. No response. Then I called again. No response. Meanwhile, the Karma dealer in Indy, he knew I'd be coming the next week and I was going to get a hold of it. So I left a message. I'll be there on, Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever it is. Nothing back. And then I called again. And then I called again when I went to Indianapolis. Nothing. Never got back. And I realized that there are, Facebook groups for Fisker Karma, things like that out there. There's a lot of enthusiasts. And the guy at Indy, the person, the head guy at the dealership, it was funny because when I went to leave the phone, I'm like, hey, thanks very much for your time, goodbye. He goes, his closing greeting or whatever was, welcome to the fellowship. And I'm like, easy dude, I'm not trying to join a cult. I'm just thinking about buying a Fisker. So it's kind of funny, obviously nothing negative, but at that point, I didn't care as much. I had already realized that the place in Pennsylvania was either too busy or didn't want to take me serious or just didn't care. So I kind of written them off. And then my only other reasonable opportunity to have a good relationship with a Fisker Karma for my wife and maintaining it was the dealership in Indianapolis. And they absolutely dropped the ball, did not get back to any calls or emails at all. And I just told my wife, I said, I think the car is as neat as can be and I'd love to have one, but it doesn't seem there's any worthwhile support of anybody who cares. So we can't do this car. Which is sad because I think it's a really interesting concept, and it's the first time in my car owning career of the many funky and weird cars I've had. And I even daily drove a DeLorean for 2.5 years, whether it's rain, shine, or snow and ice, and had no problems. But the Fisker Karmas were just like, I don't know what to tell you. So that's why we didn't do it. And doing this video not to knock or take away from either Tesla or Fisker, because I think they're both fascinating and interesting concepts and great cars. And maybe someday I'll own one, or my wife will own one if we find a better relationship with a place that can help service or at least computer interface with the Fisker. Or if we have more money and feel like being more boring with a Tesla. No offense, but like, you know what I mean. And so instead, she got a very good deal on an '08 Maserati Gran Turismo. Has the true automatic transmission, so that doesn't wear out. Those engines do well. Relatively easy to change oil. And while if you're going to a dealership to deal with the computer, which the car is actually right now at a Ferrari Maserati dealer where they're actually treating us well, had a little computer glitches, it'll be right back in action. So for the same price point, she could have a world caliber, cool Italian car that should be relatively reliable, or at least in the scope of reason. And so I guess that's just the way it didn't work out. So I wanted to bring that up relating to the Fisker Karma. I think it's a really interesting car. I'd love to have one. I love the concept. I think the community is pretty cool, and there's a lot of people could be into one. And I think there's also a lot of YouTube videos that are really stupid, where they say stupid, trite things to slander the car to get views. And I don't think that's fair. And I feel badly that I'm making this video as to why we didn't buy one. But I think this hopefully will be helpful to a community of people wanting to when you're trying to realize you need to have that relationship with a service type place. And also hopefully a wake-up call for the places that can service a Fisker that's like, hey guys, maybe you should be slightly nicer, or once in a blue moon get back on a phone call or email to a person so that you keep having business in the future. And in terms of the Tesla, I will leave this one parting thought, which I'm not into. So this is by no means I can't even say conspiracy theory. It's okay, algorithm, don't bite me, I'm not a freak. But in all seriousness, so Teslas are really amazing because they can drive themselves. But they require you to be kind of engaged and attentive for the legality purposes all. But the cars can drive themselves. Our neighbor has one, it's really cool. And it drives itself out of its garage, and I'm just like, that's insane. The thing I don't like as an individual about a car that is controlled by a computer that can literally drive you around is, at what point does the automobile drive itself and just become a physical manifestation of internet algorithms, driving people to exactly the middle of the bell curve where it wants to put you, because the algorithm can make the most money off you, or it fits best within the system? At what point does that happen? Because that's not a stretch. That's already happening. But I'm an individual, and I love art and life and the differences of people and everything out there. And the thing that I find is the art and life and those unique differences that make life interesting and worth enjoying are all the things that are on the outskirts of the algorithm, that you have to go out and seek and find, look and listen. Because if you just go by what the algorithms give you, life gets really boring in the middle of the bell curve. So it's the same thing for cars. For my wife, she chose a Maserati, and maybe it'll be a little bit cantankerous. And hopefully in the day we have something that maybe is a little more environmentally friendly. But it's never going to be a slave to an algorithm. And if everything gets too crazy, I'll just have a nice horse and feed it hay and carrots, and we'll ride it. And that's that. So, horsepower, whether it's a friendly friend on 4 legs with hooves or a Maserati, very cool. And in terms of the electric car and EV community, yeah, you guys might want to work on your standards of like customer relations to have things serviced. And Tesla, stop being so boring, middle of the bell curve algorithm. That doesn't work for us rugged individualist artist types. Yes, now you're angry. It's like I'm trolling your betrothed Elon Musk. All hail Elon, except for me. I'm good without. But he's cool. I like space. And that's it. And you guys should totally subscribe, because if I ticked you off, then maybe I won't in the future, or I will. And if I didn't tick you off and you agree with me, don't wait, there's more coming. And by the way, pterosaur, yes. So that's why we didn't buy a Fisker Karma or a Tesla. Maybe someday in the future, but for right now, Maserati. Catch you guys next time. Car racing is the most affordable form of motorsports there is, and it's also the most competitive. So for that reason, you've got to have an amazing chassis. And for me, it's TopKart. When I'm at a race, I simply go to TopKartUSA.com, check out their chassis setup and tuning guide, and that's the secret that gets me on the podium. So when it's time for you to go racing, call up TopKart USA. Shout out to KW Suspension. Guys, this year you're going to see beautiful coilovers such as this going on many of my cars, including my Porsche 944, my Dodge Viper, and even some of these crazy race cars. And the reason is simple. This is one of the best shock companies in the world. It was founded in Germany in 1992 by Klaus Wohlfarth, and recently they just launched a new 1.2 million square foot robotic warehouse where they're creating unbelievably nice suspension components such as this for 15 different original equipment manufacturers. So whether you're a street enthusiast, a weekend track warrior, or you are building the Le Mans car of your dreams, guys, check out KW Suspension. Unbelievably nice shocks. So go down in the description below, patronize them. You're going to be glad you did.